The climate wars continue, and I've got to say, some of the political debate and the way it's covered in the media does my head in. I saw some of the coverage on news programs last night, and like lemmings, the media is pretending that Australia's 2030 target really matters. Labor pretends it does, of course, but it most definitely does not. It matters only for a phony political debate. If you're sceptical about climate alarmism and realistic about Australia's role in global climate emissions, you'll know none of our targets really matter at all. But if you reckon the world needs to reduce emissions and get to net zero, and that this country needs to do its bit as a responsible global citizen, then the point that matters is that all political parties, and especially the major parties, Labor and the Coalition, well, they're all committed to net zero by 2050. That's it. That's the goal. 25 years to get to net zero. The only other things that matter are how you get there and what the costs will be. I mean, either you continue an expensive and failing experiment in renewables plus storage, as Labor says we should do, or you bring in nuclear energy, as the Coalition promises, using a proven emissions-free technology that more than 20 of the world's largest economies not only use now, but plan to increase 3 times over to get to net zero. Anyway, just to highlight the nonsense put about at the moment, I thought I'd show you some highlights from the Prime Minister's media conference today and explain a few facts around them. Most of the media just run his lines without the facts and without exposing the bunkum. So let's start with Anthony Albanese on the Coalition's declaration not to bother with the 2030 target because 2050 is what matters and they'll need time to get nuclear up and running.
This is an extraordinary failure of leadership from Peter Dutton. It shows he's not up to the job of being the alternative Prime Minister of this country.
Well, no, Prime Minister. On the contrary, clearly this is leadership. Going along with you, going along with Labor and the Greens, that would not be leadership. That would be acquiescence. Dutton is showing obvious leadership and he's providing a real alternative policy and therefore alternative leadership for the nation. Now, have a listen to Albanese's next spray, a tortured analogy if I've ever heard one, trying a little bit too hard, I think. It goes on a bit, but have a look.
It's a bit like someone getting on a plane at the new airport on one of those mystery flights where you don't know where you're going to go, you don't know what the destination is, you think you're going to one direction but you find yourself on the other part of Australia or the other part of the world. And you can't get off your flight until 2040 because that's when the nuclear fantasy will land if they can find a location, if they can find someone who'll fund a nuclear power plant. Until then, you're going to have to parachute out of the plane and take pot luck at where you land.
I mean, I don't know, you're on a mystery flight till 2040 and you need a parachute. I don't know. With a nickname like Airbus Albo, you'd think he'd avoid airline gags. But the analogy is just so plainly wrong because the destination is absolutely known. The destination is net zero by 2050. So, Albo, let me explain. It's like you're flying to Paris by one route and Dutton's flying to Paris via Dubai. You both reckon you'll get to Paris, so that's the destination. But to be fair to Albo, he says he'll get there via a renewables plus storage route that no one's tried before. It's like Albo's going to Paris via Antarctica. We're a lot more likely to get there following the tried and tested Dutton route. Still, the PM had plenty more to say.
The world is moving. The global economy is transitioning to clean energy, and Australia has a comparative advantage.
Firstly, no, the world is not transitioning. Australia is ahead of the game already with our emissions cuts. Global emissions are increasing by about the total emissions of Australia every year. driven by big growth in countries like China and India, where they are building many, many new coal-fired generators. Australia's comparative advantage is actually well known. We have abundant energy resources: coal, gas and uranium. We're one of the world's largest exporters of all three. And rather than take advantage of our comparative advantage, Labor and Albanese aim to make sure we do not use any of those resources in this country. It's madness. It's national self-harm. Still, it's clear the Prime Minister is really focused on attacking Dutton.
Peter Dutton is isolated in the naughty corner and wants us to join Iran, Yemen and Libya as countries outside the Paris Accord and outside climate action.
Well, some would say this attack is based on misinformation or an untruth or spin. Well, I'll call it what it is. It's a lie. Albanese is saying Dutton will abandon the Paris Accord. But as you know, the coalition is sticking to the Paris Accord and sticking to the Paris target of net zero by 2050. Oh, and as for joining Iran, Yemen and Libya, it was Albanese who joined those three countries. It was the Albanese Labor government that joined those shocking countries in the disgraceful United Nations vote about Palestinian statehood. Still, let's get back to climate change. Albanese went on with the usual nutty alarmism.
This is about our economy. It's about our jobs, but it's also about our environment. Since I've been Prime Minister, I have attended natural disasters in New South Wales, Tasmania, the Kimberley, the Adelaide Riverland, northern Tasmania, the Gold Coast hinterland, far north Queensland. We are a country that is prone to extreme weather events, and climate change is making those extreme weather events more intense and more frequent.
Scary country. I wonder why anybody would want to live here. More misinformation there, more spin, untruths and lies. Albanese is firstly pretending that natural disasters are getting worse. They are not. That's the fact. Plenty of scientists, to be fair, suggest they will get worse, but there's no evidence that that is actually happening. In fact, there's clear evidence that cyclones, for instance, are getting rarer and less damaging. And as for permanent drought, well, when's the last time Tim Flannery was brave enough to poke his head up? And also, of course, even if the climate was getting worse, there is no way that what Australia does between now and 2030 can make one iota of difference. To suggest that our 2030 target could influence the climate is about as unscientific as you can get. It means you will happily abandon facts, science and reality in favour of emotive and baseless fear-mongering. And that just about sums up the approach from Labor, the Greens and the Teals in these climate wars. Their hypocrisy is exposed by their antipathy towards nuclear energy. If they were really worried about the climate and really committed to a strong economy with reliable power, they'd be feverishly promoting nuclear power, the way that the political left do in Europe. But they're not really about saving the planet or delivering a renewable energy superpower. They're about playing politics, and they're about trying to play voters for fools.